Move, black lady, or I'll move you myself. Officer Jason Miller grabbed Alicia Brooks by the front of her jacket and slammed her hard against the side of her aging silver SUV. The impact sent her grocery bags crashing onto the asphalt, oranges rolling beneath parked cars as shoppers froze in disbelief. Jason smirked while straightening his uniform. A black woman driving a beat-up SUV and acting this calm? I've seen this movie before. You're not fooling anybody. He shoved her again, harder this time, before pointing a finger inches from her face. You know what people will remember? Not your excuses. They'll remember another black woman caught with drugs. Several bystanders gasped. Without warning, Jason yanked open the driver's door, reached into the vehicle, then walked to the trunk. Seconds later, he raised a clear plastic bag filled with white powder high into the air. "There it is!" he shouted triumphantly. "Looks like your little secret couldn't stay hidden." Sergeant Brian Collins snapped handcuffs onto Alicia's wrists so tightly she flinched. He leaned close enough that only she could hear. "By tonight, you'll be another headline everyone forgets. Nobody important is coming to save you." Jason laughed and added loudly for the crowd, "Smile for the cameras. This is probably the most attention you'll ever get." Phones filled the air as people began recording. Some looked horrified. Others believed every word the officers said. Alicia never resisted. She simply looked Jason in the eye and said quietly, "You've just arrested the wrong woman." At that exact moment, a convoy of black SUVs rolled into the parking lot. 12 federal agents stepped out in perfect formation, and the lead agent walked straight toward the handcuffed woman without saying a word. If this opening made your heart race, stay with us because the truth is far bigger than anyone in that parking lot could imagine. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from and what your local time is. We love seeing viewers from around the world. And if you enjoy stories where courage overcomes corruption and justice finally prevails, consider subscribing so you don't miss what happens next. 24 hours earlier, nothing about Alicia Brooks looked extraordinary. Every weekday began the same way. Before sunrise, she unlocked the doors of the South Haven Community Resource Center on the east side of Savannah, Georgia. The aging brick building wasn't impressive, but to hundreds of struggling families, it was the closest thing to hope. Alicia organized food drives, helped veterans complete benefit applications, found emergency shelter for single mothers, and quietly paid utility bills for families who had nowhere else to turn. Few people knew she often skipped lunch so someone else's child could eat. Even fewer knew she drove the same 12-year-old silver SUV because she refused to spend money on herself while so many around her needed help. "Morning, Miss Alicia," an elderly volunteer called as she carried boxes of canned food toward the pantry. Alicia smiled warmly. "Morning, Mr. Lewis. Don't lift those by yourself. Your back still hasn't forgiven you." He laughed. "You always worry more about everyone else than yourself." She simply shrugged. "Somebody has to." Across town, in a completely different world, Officer Jason Miller sat in an unmarked patrol vehicle watching Alicia's SUV through a pair of binoculars. Beside him, Sergeant Brian Collins scrolled through a thick folder. "No criminal history," Brian muttered. Jason frowned. "Nothing? Nothing. No unpaid warrants?" Brian shook his head. "Not even a parking ticket." Jason leaned back with an irritated sigh. "I don't like clean records." Brian smirked. "They're easier to break." The two men had perfected the same routine over the past 6 years. Find someone unlikely to fight back. Choose someone without political influence. Make sure the public would believe the accusation before the suspect ever opened their mouth. Then manufacture the evidence. Most victims accepted plea deals because they couldn't afford lawyers. Others lost jobs, homes, or custody of their children long before a courtroom ever heard the truth. The officers called it efficient policing. No one else knew it was organized corruption. Brian tossed another photograph onto the dashboard. "This is our next one." Jason studied the image. Alicia was helping an elderly black veteran load groceries into the back of her SUV. Jason chuckled. "Always helping people." Brian nodded. "Exactly. They're the easiest to destroy." Jason narrowed his eyes. "Community volunteer. No expensive lawyer. No wealthy relatives. No political connections." Brian smiled coldly. "And she's trusted." Jason looked puzzled. "So?" Brian's grin widened. "When trusted people fall, everyone remembers the fall more than the truth." Silence settled inside the vehicle. Then Jason asked the question that determined every target. "Anybody coming to save her?" Brian closed the folder. "No." Jason smiled. "Perfect." Neither man realized someone was quietly photographing their unmarked cruiser from across the street. An older man wearing worn work boots and pushing a battered shopping cart paused beside a newspaper stand, just long enough to capture 3 images with a tiny camera hidden beneath the cart's handle. He continued walking without looking back. Inside the community center, Alicia finished helping a young mother whose electricity had been disconnected. "You don't owe me anything," Alicia said gently as the grateful woman fought back tears. "I'll pay you back." "You already have." "How?" "Promise me that when life gets better, you'll help someone else." The woman nodded. "I promise." Alicia watched her leave before glancing discreetly at the wall clock. "Sebelas das a.m. Right on schedule." She quietly locked her office door and opened a plain notebook hidden inside the bottom drawer of her desk. The pages weren't filled with client information. Instead, they contained dates, license plate numbers, patrol routes, names of officers, and handwritten observations that no ordinary community worker should have known. She studied one entry for several seconds before adding a single sentence. "Subject appears increasingly impatient. Escalation expected soon." She closed the notebook immediately after hearing footsteps outside. A volunteer knocked. "Miss Alicia?" She slid the notebook back into the drawer. "Come in. We're almost out of bottled water. I'll pick some up this afternoon." "Thank you." "My pleasure." Within seconds, the warm, approachable community volunteer had returned, as though the notebook had never existed. By early afternoon, Alicia loaded donated supplies into her SUV before driving toward a wholesale grocery store. She never noticed the dark sedan pulling out 2 blocks behind her. Jason. 3 vehicles farther back, Brian followed in another unmarked car. They maintained enough distance to avoid suspicion while never letting Alicia disappear. Jason spoke through a concealed radio. "Target is moving." Brian answered calmly. "Parking lot will be crowded in 20 minutes. "Perfect." "Witnesses?" "Plenty." Jason laughed. "The more people watching, the faster they'll believe us." Traffic slowed near a busy intersection. Alicia stopped at a red light. In her rearview mirror, she briefly noticed the same dark sedan she'd seen twice earlier that week. For just a moment, something felt wrong. Not fear. Recognition. She held the mirror a second longer before the light turned green. Then she drove on without changing her calm expression. Behind her, Jason smiled. I think she noticed. Brian wasn't concerned. Doesn't matter. Why not? Because she still has no idea what's about to happen. Neither officer noticed another black SUV several blocks away, quietly changing lanes to remain within sight of both unmarked patrol cars. Inside, a man wearing an earpiece watched multiple GPS signals moving across a tablet. Without taking his eyes off the screen, he spoke into a secure microphone. "Target Alpha is approaching the designated location." A calm voice answered through the speaker. "Maintain observation. No intervention unless authorized." The man acknowledged the order. "Understood." Ahead, Alicia pulled into the crowded supermarket parking lot, completely unaware that within minutes dozens of strangers would witness the moment her life appeared to fall apart. Or so Jason Miller believed. He parked 2 rows away, adjusted the body camera clipped to his uniform, and smiled to himself. "This one," he whispered, stepping out of the vehicle, "is going to be easy." He had absolutely no idea that every move he was about to make had already become part of someone else's plan. The supermarket parking lot buzzed with the ordinary rhythm of a busy Wednesday afternoon. Shopping carts rattled across the pavement. Children laughed beside family cars. A delivery truck backed toward the loading dock, while customers streamed through the automatic doors carrying groceries. Alicia Brooks parked her aging silver SUV near the entrance, switched off the engine, and glanced at the list folded inside her notebook. Bottled water, canned vegetables, baby formula, everything the community center needed before the weekend. She had barely opened the driver's door when flashing blue lights exploded behind her. A police cruiser screeched to a stop at an angle, blocking her SUV. Another cruiser pulled in from the opposite direction. Within seconds, curious shoppers stopped walking. Officer Jason Miller climbed out first. His expression already carried the confidence of someone who believed the outcome had been decided long before the encounter began. He pointed directly at Alicia. "Hands where I can see them!" Several people instinctively stepped backward. Alicia slowly raised both empty hands. "Officer, is something wrong?" Jason walked closer, stopping only inches away. "We received a report that your vehicle matches one involved in narcotics trafficking." Alicia frowned. "There has to be some mistake." Jason laughed loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Funny. That's exactly what people always say." Sergeant Brian Collins arrived beside him, folding his arms. "We'll find out soon enough." Alicia kept her voice calm. May I know who made the report? Jason ignored the question. Step away from the vehicle. She complied immediately. Without warning, Jason roughly grabbed her wrist and pulled her farther from the SUV. A nearby woman gasped. She isn't resisting. Jason shot the bystander a cold stare. Then don't interfere with police business. The woman lowered her phone but continued recording. Brian slowly circled the SUV. Consent to search? Alicia answered honestly. I know my rights, I don't consent. Jason smiled as though he'd expected exactly that response. Good. He tapped the hood of the SUV. We don't need your permission. Brian spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. Probable cause. Jason nodded. Search the vehicle. The crowd continued growing. Some whispered that the woman looked harmless. Others assumed the officers already knew something the public didn't. Exactly the reaction Jason wanted. He opened the driver's door and began searching with exaggerated movements. Glove compartment. Center console. Back seat. Nothing. Brian leaned closer and whispered, Time. Jason gave the slightest nod. As Brian deliberately moved toward the rear passenger side, Jason walked behind the SUV, momentarily disappearing from every civilian camera blocked by the vehicle itself. His hand slipped inside his uniform jacket. When it emerged again, a small vacuum-sealed plastic package rested against his palm. One quick motion. The rear hatch lifted. His hand disappeared for barely 2 seconds. Then he closed it. To anyone watching from the front, nothing seemed unusual. Jason immediately raised his voice. Let's check the trunk. He pressed the release button dramatically. The hatch lifted. He reached inside. Less than 3 seconds later, he pulled out a clear plastic package containing white powder. His face broke into a triumphant grin. There it is. He held the package high above his head like a hunter displaying a trophy. The parking lot erupted. Oh my God. I knew something was wrong. Did they really find drugs? Several phones zoomed closer. Jason turned toward the cameras. Approximately 2 kilograms of suspected cocaine. Brian shook his head theatrically. Looks like we've got ourselves a major dealer. Alicia stared at the package without changing her expression. That wasn't in my vehicle. Jason barked a sarcastic laugh. Sure. He took one slow step toward her. So the drugs climbed into your trunk all by themselves? A few people chuckled nervously. Others looked uncomfortable. Alicia spoke evenly. I've never seen that package before. Jason leaned close enough for only she could hear. You won't convince anyone. Then he turned back toward the crowd. This is why we stop suspicious vehicles. Brian removed a pair of steel handcuffs. Turn around. Alicia looked directly at him. I've done nothing wrong. Brian's voice hardened. Turn around. Without waiting another second, he grabbed both of her wrists and twisted them behind her back. The metal cuffs snapped shut with a sharp click. Several bystanders visibly flinched. An elderly black man stepped forward. Officer, I watched the whole thing. Jason pointed aggressively at him. One more step and you're obstructing an investigation. The man stopped. His granddaughter tugged on his sleeve. Grandpa. Reluctantly, he stepped back. Jason smiled. One witness neutralized. At the edge of the crowd, the television reporter adjusted her microphone. We're reporting live from what appears to be a significant narcotics arrest outside South Haven Market. Her cameraman slowly zoomed toward Alicia's face. She expected panic. Instead, she captured something completely different. Calm. Steady breathing. No pleading. No tears. No anger. Only quiet observation. The reporter frowned. That's unusual. Meanwhile, across the parking lot, the older man pushing the battered shopping cart watched everything unfold. His eyes never left Jason's hands. He quietly pressed a tiny button hidden beneath the cart handle. Miles away, inside an operations center filled with computer monitors, a small indicator changed from green to flashing red. One analyst looked up immediately. Signal received. Another turned toward the supervisor. Field Observer 3 has confirmed evidence placement. The supervisor stood without hesitation. Notify Team Alpha. Authorization? He answered with only 2 words. Execute Phase 2. Back in the parking lot, Jason believed victory was complete. He looked directly into one of the live stream cameras. This city just became a little safer. Alicia finally broke her silence. She looked at Jason with the same calm expression she had worn since the beginning. Then she quietly said, No, officer. You just made your last mistake. Jason laughed so hard that several officers nearby joined him. None of them noticed. Several blocks away, a convoy of black SUVs had just turned onto the boulevard leading toward the supermarket. The steel handcuffs bit into Alicia Brooks' wrists as Sergeant Brian Collins deliberately tightened them one final click. She drew a slow breath but never cried out. Jason Miller smirked. "What's wrong? They hurt?" He leaned close enough for only she could hear. "They're supposed to." Then he turned dramatically toward the growing crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly why we stay out here every day. Dangerous people don't always look dangerous." Several shoppers nodded. Others looked uncertain. The television reporter continued broadcasting live. "We're witnessing the arrest of a woman officers say was found transporting suspected narcotics. Police have not yet released her identity." Alicia quietly corrected her. "My name is Alicia Brooks." Jason interrupted before the reporter could respond. "Don't bother remembering it." He laughed. "By tomorrow, she'll just be another mugshot on the evening news." A few people lowered their eyes. Something about the scene didn't feel right. An elderly black veteran who had spoken earlier stepped forward again, his weathered army cap clutched tightly in his hands. "I watched everything," he said firmly. "That officer disappeared behind her SUV before he opened the trunk." Jason's smile vanished instantly. "You again?" The veteran didn't back away. "I served this country for 29 years. I know what I saw." Jason walked directly toward him. "You calling me a liar?" "I'm saying everyone deserves the truth." Without warning, Jason shoved the elderly man hard in the chest. The veteran stumbled backward into a shopping cart as horrified gasps rippled through the parking lot. "Grandpa." His granddaughter rushed forward to steady him. Jason pointed a finger inches from the old man's face. "Say one more word and I'll arrest you for interfering with a police investigation." The parking lot fell silent. Nobody moved. Nobody wanted to become the next target. Alicia watched the entire exchange without changing her expression. Inside, however, she carefully noted every face, every witness, every camera angle, every reaction. Brian walked back toward her carrying an evidence bag. "We've got the drugs." He looked toward the reporter. "We've got body camera footage." Then he smiled at Alicia. "And we've got probable cause." Jason nodded confidently. "This case is finished." At least, that was what they believed. Across the street, inside a small coffee shop, a young woman wearing headphones closed her laptop the moment she saw the confrontation through the front window. She quietly picked up her phone. "They've moved to physical custody," she whispered. A calm voice answered. "Status? They threatened a civilian witness." "Copy. No intervention? Continue observing." The call ended. She calmly walked outside, blending into the growing crowd like any other customer. Meanwhile, Brian searched through Alicia's handbag in full view of everyone. A notebook, a wallet, car keys, receipts, a small photograph of several smiling children standing outside the community center. Jason held up the picture with a sarcastic grin. "Nice act." He tossed it onto the pavement. "You charity people always think a few good deeds erase the bad ones." The photograph slid beneath a parked car. Alicia glanced toward it but never moved. The young granddaughter quietly crawled beneath the vehicle, retrieved the picture, brushed away the dust, and carefully held it against her chest. She looked up at Alicia. "I'll keep it safe." For the first time since the arrest began, Alicia smiled, only slightly. Jason noticed. "You still think somebody's coming?" He laughed. "Let me save you the disappointment." He stepped even closer. "In 30 minutes, you'll be sitting in an interrogation room. In 2 hours, you'll have fingerprints. By tonight, every news station in this city will call you a drug trafficker." He paused deliberately. "And nobody will remember anything else." Alicia met his stare. "They'll remember." Jason chuckled. "They always say that." Suddenly, another voice interrupted. "Officer!" Everyone turned. The television reporter held up her microphone. "One question." Jason loved cameras. He adjusted his vest. "Go ahead. Can you explain why multiple witnesses say they never actually saw the drugs until after you searched behind the SUV?" For the first time, Jason hesitated, only half a second. Then he smiled again. "That's easy." He pointed toward the crowd. "People don't always notice everything during stressful situations." The reporter wasn't satisfied. "So you're saying every witness is mistaken?" "I said they didn't see everything." The question lingered in the air. Before Jason could continue, Brian quietly tugged his sleeve. "Enough interviews." Jason nodded. "Right." He grabbed Alicia's arm. "We're leaving." The moment he started pulling her toward the patrol vehicle, the elderly veteran spoke once more. His voice wasn't loud, but every person nearby heard it. "If she's innocent," Jason spun around furiously. "If she's innocent, what?" The old man looked directly into his eyes. "Then someday you're going to pray this day never happened." Jason burst into laughter. "I don't pray." Brian joined him. Neither officer noticed several people exchanging uneasy looks. The confidence the officers displayed no longer felt reassuring. It felt rehearsed. Across the parking lot, The young woman who had made the phone call glanced at her watch. She smiled faintly. Right on time. Less than a mile away, 12 black SUVs turned through a green light in perfect formation. Each vehicle maintained identical spacing. No seatings, no flashing lights, only quiet precision. Inside the lead SUV, the senior federal agent reviewed a thin, sealed folder. Across the front was a single printed name. Alicia Brooks. He closed the folder and looked through the windshield. How much longer? The driver checked the navigation display. 90 seconds. The agent nodded once. Nobody moves until I give the order. Yes, sir. Back at the supermarket, Jason opened the rear door of the patrol cruiser. Get in. Alicia remained standing. I'll ask one last time. Jason sighed dramatically. You really don't know when you've lost. Alicia answered in the same calm voice she had maintained since the beginning. No, I know exactly when you've lost. Jason rolled his eyes. Brian reached for her shoulder, and at that exact moment, every head in the parking lot turned toward the entrance. 1, 2, 3. 12 identical black SUVs rolled silently across the asphalt before stopping in a perfect line. Their doors opened almost simultaneously. Men and women wearing dark federal jackets stepped out with disciplined precision. The crowd instinctively stepped aside. Jason frowned. His confident smile slowly returned. Finally, he muttered, I guess someone important wants to congratulate us. He couldn't have been more wrong. The 12 black SUVs came to a silent stop only 30 feet from the patrol cruiser. For a brief moment, the entire parking lot seemed to stop breathing. Officer Jason Miller adjusted his vest with a smug smile. Looks like the federal boys finally decided to watch how real police work gets done. Sergeant Brian Collins chuckled. They probably heard about the drug bust. Neither officer noticed that none of the newcomers looked at the plastic evidence bag. None of them even glanced toward the patrol car. Every pair of eyes settled on Alicia Brooks. The lead agent stepped out first. Tall, gray-haired, calm. There was no urgency in his movements, only absolute confidence. He was followed by 11 agents who spread across the parking lot with practiced precision, quietly positioning themselves without drawing weapons. The crowd instinctively stepped backward, creating a wide circle around the scene. The television reporter whispered into her microphone, "This situation has changed dramatically. Multiple federal agents have just arrived, though it's unclear why." Jason walked forward with a broad smile. "Afternoon, Agent." He extended his hand. "We've just wrapped up a major narcotics arrest." The senior agent looked briefly at Jason's hand. He didn't shake it. Instead, he calmly asked, "Who is in charge of this scene?" Jason frowned slightly. "I am." The agent nodded once. "Keep everyone exactly where they are." Jason blinked. "I'm sorry." "Nobody leaves." Brian stepped forward. "With all due respect, this is a local investigation." The senior agent finally looked at him. "It isn't anymore." An uneasy silence settled over the parking lot. Jason forced another smile. "If you're here for paperwork, we'll have everything ready after booking." The agent ignored him. He slowly turned toward Alicia. She remained handcuffed beside the patrol cruiser. Their eyes met for only a second. No words, no visible acknowledgement, just a calm understanding that neither Jason nor Brian noticed. The agent turned back toward his team. "Preserve the scene." Immediately, 4 federal agents began placing portable evidence markers around the parking lot. Another photographed the ground. A fourth began recording continuous video from multiple angles. Jason raised his voice. "What exactly are you doing?" One of the agents answered without looking up. "Documenting." Brian's expression hardened. "We've already documented everything." The agent calmly replied, "We'll decide that ourselves." Across the crowd, whispers spread quickly. "Why are the feds photographing everything? Did something happen? Are they investigating the officers?" The television reporter sensed the shift immediately. She turned toward her cameraman. "Stay live. We're not cutting away." Meanwhile, the elderly veteran stepped quietly beside his granddaughter. "They're not here for her," he whispered. "They're here because something bigger is happening." The little girl looked toward Alicia. "I knew she wasn't scared." Jason's patience began slipping. He walked directly toward the senior agent. "Listen, I've got probable cause. I've got the drugs. I've got body camera footage. I've got witnesses. So unless you're taking over the prosecution, I'd appreciate it if you let us finish our job." The senior agent remained completely expressionless. "What time did you begin the stop?" Jason hesitated. "Approximately 2:17. What time was the evidence recovered?" "Around 2:24. The agent wrote something inside a small notebook. Then he asked another question. "Who first opened the rear compartment of the vehicle?" Jason answered confidently. "I did." And who first handled the evidence package? I did. The agent nodded again. Thank you. Jason smiled. Happy now? Instead of answering, the senior agent looked toward another federal investigator. Collect the body camera recording. Brian immediately stepped between them. Those recordings are departmental property. The investigator calmly replied. They're now evidence. Brian crossed his arms. You don't have a warrant. Before the conversation could continue, another federal agent approached carrying a slim black case. He opened it in front of the senior agent. Inside were several sealed documents. The senior agent glanced at the first page before closing the case again. Very good. Jason tried to look over his shoulder. What's that? The agent closed the latches. Not for you. Across the parking lot, the older man with the battered shopping cart quietly disappeared into the crowd. No one noticed. At the same time, the young woman from the coffee shop received a short encrypted message on her phone. Phase 2 confirmed. She looked toward Alicia and smiled almost imperceptibly. Everything was unfolding exactly as expected. Jason, however, believed he still controlled the situation. He turned toward the reporter. Let me be perfectly clear. This woman was found with enough cocaine to destroy countless lives. He pointed toward Alicia. Whatever story she comes up with later doesn't change the fact. Alicia finally spoke. What facts? Jason laughed. The drugs in your trunk. She tilted her head slightly. Or the drugs someone wanted everyone to believe were in my trunk. A ripple of murmurs moved through the crowd. Jason immediately pointed at her. See? She's already making excuses. The senior agent interrupted quietly. No one asked her another question. Jason stopped talking. The tone wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. For the first time since the arrest began, Jason felt something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. He looked toward Brian. Brian gave him a reassuring nod, but his confidence wasn't as convincing as before. The senior agent checked his watch. Then he looked toward one of his investigators. Has the final confirmation arrived? Yes, sir. And the chain of custody verification? Completed. What about Observer 3? He confirmed visual contact. The senior agent nodded. Good. He slowly walked toward Alicia until only a few feet separated them. Jason instinctively moved to block his path. She's in police custody. The agent looked directly into Jason's eyes. For another few seconds. Jason frowned. What does that mean? The senior agent reached inside his jacket. Instead of removing a weapon, he pulled out a thick, sealed federal credential packet with a single name printed across the front. He held it in both hands but did not open it. Every federal agent in the parking lot immediately stopped moving. The crowd fell silent once again. Even the reporter lowered her microphone. The senior agent spoke only 6 quiet words. Officer Miller, remove the handcuffs. Jason stared at him in disbelief. No. The agent didn't raise his voice. That wasn't a request. Jason laughed nervously. I think you've been given bad information. Brian stepped beside him. She's under arrest. The senior agent slowly broke the seal on the credential packet. As the envelope opened, every federal agent took one synchronized step forward. The sealed credential packet split open with a slow, deliberate tear. No one spoke. Even the wind seemed to disappear. Officer Jason Miller folded his arms and forced a laugh. This is getting ridiculous. Sergeant Brian Collins nodded confidently. If you're trying to intimidate local law enforcement, you're wasting your time. The senior federal agent ignored both men. Instead, he removed a single laminated credential, glanced at it briefly, then slipped it back inside without allowing anyone else to read it. He wasn't revealing anything. Not yet. He looked toward one of his investigators. Begin evidence preservation. Immediately, 2 agents walked toward Alicia's silver SUV. Jason stepped directly into their path. No one touches that vehicle. One investigator calmly replied, Everything remains exactly where it is. Brian shook his head. That's active evidence. The investigator met his eyes. It may become something very different. Jason's smile faded. What is that supposed to mean? No answer came. Instead, another federal agent approached, carrying a compact forensic camera, and began photographing the trunk from every angle without disturbing a single item inside. 1 photo, 2 photos, then photos, then close-ups of the latch, the weather seal, the hinges, the cargo floor. Jason frowned. Why are you photographing the hinges? The forensic agent never looked up. Standard procedure. Jason scoffed. No, it isn't. The agent quietly continued documenting every inch of the vehicle. Across the parking lot, the television reporter whispered into her microphone. This is highly unusual. Federal investigators appear more interested in preserving the scene than supporting the arrest. Her producer's voice came through the earpiece. Stay live. Every station in the city is taking our feed. The reporter swallowed. Understood. Within minutes, thousands of viewers were watching. Back near the patrol cruiser, Brian took a step toward the senior federal agent. I've cooperated. You've seen the drugs. You've seen the arrest. So unless there's something you're prepared to explain, we're transporting the suspect. The senior agent calmly checked his watch. No. Brian's jaw tightened. No? No one is transporting anyone. Jason finally lost his patience. You don't have authority over my investigation. The senior agent slowly turned toward him. Are you certain about that? Jason answered immediately. Absolutely. The older man simply nodded, as though he'd expected that response. Interesting. He pressed a small button on the radio clipped beneath his jacket. Within seconds, 3 additional federal SUVs rolled into the parking lot. The crowd gasped. More agents stepped out carrying sealed evidence, containers, and portable scanners. Jason stared. What is all this? One investigator rolled a mobile forensic cart toward Alicia's SUV. Another began placing numbered evidence markers around the area where Jason had searched moments earlier. Marker 1, Marker 2, Marker 3. Nothing was touched. Everything was documented. The precision unsettled everyone watching, including Brian. Meanwhile, the elderly veteran quietly approached the television reporter. I told you. She lowered her microphone. Told me what? The officers looked certain before they even opened the trunk. The reporter thought back. Jason had smiled. Before he claimed to find the drugs. She replayed the memory in her head. Something about that confidence suddenly felt wrong. Very wrong. Across the parking lot, Alicia remained standing exactly where Brian had left her. Her wrists were still cuffed, yet she showed no sign of fear. One younger federal agent walked past her. As he passed, he spoke so quietly no civilian could hear. Ma'am, Alicia answered without looking at him. Status? Everything is on schedule. She gave the slightest nod. Good. Then both returned to complete silence. Jason noticed nothing. His attention remained fixed on the senior agent. You've wasted enough time. He reached toward Alicia's arm. We're leaving. Before his hand could touch her, the senior agent spoke. Officer Miller. Jason stopped. If you lay another hand on her. He paused. You'll create a second crime scene today. The words hit the parking lot like thunder. Brian laughed uneasily. Crime scene? Jason pointed toward Alicia. She's the suspect. The senior agent answered calmly. That assumption is becoming increasingly expensive. Jason stared. What does that mean? Again, no answer. Instead, another federal investigator approached carrying a tablet. Sir. The senior agent looked at the screen for several seconds. Observer 3? The investigator nodded. Confirmed. What about Observer 4? Independent confirmation received. And the civilian broadcast? Continuous from 3 separate angles. The senior agent handed the tablet back. Excellent. Jason's stomach tightened. Observer? Independent confirmation? 3 camera angles? None of those phrases belonged in an ordinary drug arrest. Brian leaned closer. What exactly are you investigating? The senior agent looked directly at him. The truth. The simple answer unsettled Brian more than any accusation could have. Across the parking lot, the young woman from the coffee shop quietly removed her baseball cap. Beneath it rested a discreet communications earpiece. She spoke only 4 words. Phase 3 is ready. A calm reply came instantly. Stand by. The television reporter noticed something else. Every federal agent kept glancing not at the drugs, but at Alicia, not with suspicion, with respect. The realization sent chills down her spine. She quietly whispered into the live broadcast. I don't know who this woman is, but something tells me we've all misunderstood what's happening here. Jason heard the comment. He pointed angrily toward the camera. Stop speculating. The reporter refused to lower the microphone. I'm reporting what I'm seeing. And what I see, she looked from the federal agents back to Alicia, is that no one here seems to believe she's the real criminal. A heavy silence followed. Then the senior federal agent finally reached back into the open credential packet. This time, he removed a dark leather identification wallet embossed with a gold federal seal. He held it closed in one hand. Every federal agent straightened simultaneously. The senior agent looked at Jason one final time. You've had every opportunity to do the right thing. Jason crossed his arms defiantly. I'm not removing those handcuffs. The senior agent nodded once. So be it. He slowly opened the leather credential wallet. Jason instinctively leaned forward to read it. His confident expression began to falter. The leather credential wallet slowly unfolded. Officer Jason Miller leaned forward, trying to read the identification before anyone else. The senior federal agent calmly closed it again. Not yet. Jason's face darkened. You think this is some kind of game? No. The agent's voice remained steady. I think this is your last opportunity to make a smart decision. Jason laughed loudly, making sure every phone camera captured his confidence. You still don't get it. He pointed toward Alicia Brooks. I caught her with 2 kilograms of cocaine. He slapped the clear evidence bag with the back of his hand. I've got the drugs. I've got my body camera. I've got my sergeant. And I've got dozens of witnesses. He spread both arms toward the crowd. So tell me, what exactly do you have? The senior agent answered without hesitation. Everything else. The parking lot fell silent again. Brian Collins stepped between them. That's enough. He rested one hand on the grip of his service weapon, not drawing it, but making sure everyone noticed. My officer made a lawful arrest. If anyone interferes with that arrest, he let the sentence hang. We'll treat it accordingly. Several civilians instinctively backed away. The television reporter whispered nervously into her microphone. The tension here has escalated significantly. No one appears willing to back down. Jason turned toward Alicia with a mocking grin. Well, this is the part where innocent people beg. He stepped closer until only inches separated them. Go ahead. Tell these federal agents they made a mistake. Tell them to save you. Alicia simply looked at him. I don't need anyone to save me. Jason laughed. You hear that? He looked around the crowd. She's already accepted prison. Brian grabbed Alicia's arm roughly. Start walking. The steel handcuffs jerked against her wrists. Several people gasped. The elderly veteran shouted, She's cooperating! Brian ignored him and pulled harder. Alicia stumbled one step before regaining her balance. The young granddaughter buried her face against her grandfather's side. Why are they hurting her? The old veteran couldn't answer. His eyes never left the federal agents. He sensed they were waiting for something specific. Jason reached into the patrol car. I'm done wasting time. He pulled out the rear transport key. We're taking her downtown. The senior federal agent spoke. No. Jason didn't even turn around. I wasn't asking. He unlocked the rear door. One of the younger federal investigators stepped forward. Officer Miller. Jason pointed directly at him. Take one more step. The investigator stopped immediately. The senior agent slowly raised one hand. The investigator stepped back without argument. Jason smiled triumphantly. You see? You don't want this confrontation. The senior agent calmly replied, No, we don't. Jason smirked. Smart decision. But neither do you. The words barely left the agent's mouth when another black SUV entered the parking lot. Unlike the others, this vehicle carried no government markings whatsoever. It stopped beside the federal convoy. A middle-aged woman in a dark business suit stepped out carrying a silver evidence case handcuffed to her wrist. Jason frowned. Who is that? No one answered. She walked directly toward the senior agent. Without a word, she unlocked the case. Inside rested several sealed envelopes, a portable encrypted drive, and multiple evidence seals bearing federal court markings. She handed the drive to the senior agent. Judicial authorization received. Every signature verified. Jason frowned. What authorization? The senior agent accepted the drive. Thank you. Brian's confidence began slipping. He quietly whispered, Jason. Jason waved him off. They're bluffing. They don't have anything. Across the parking lot, the television reporter received an urgent message through her earpiece. Her producer spoke quickly. Do not end the live stream. What? We're breaking viewing records. Keep every camera rolling. She looked around. 3 additional news crews had just arrived. Within minutes, helicopters could be heard overhead. The story had become the biggest live event in the city. Jason seemed almost pleased. Perfect. He smiled directly into one television camera. People deserve to see criminals arrested. Alicia finally spoke again. They're about to. Jason laughed. I agree. He looked toward Brian. Let's finish this. Brian took hold of Alicia's shoulder again. This time, the senior federal agent didn't speak. Instead, he nodded once toward 2 members of his team. They walked forward simultaneously. Not aggressively. Calmly. Purposefully. They stopped directly between Alicia and the patrol cruiser. Jason's smile vanished. What are you doing? One investigator answered, preventing another mistake. Jason's patience finally snapped. He stepped around them and reached toward Alicia's handcuffs. If you people won't move, I will. The instant his fingers touched the chain between the cuffs, the senior federal agent spoke in a voice that echoed across the silent parking lot. Officer Jason Miller. Jason froze. You are now refusing a lawful federal order in front of multiple witnesses. Brian immediately protested. Federal order? On what authority? The senior agent slowly lifted the still-open leather credential wallet. Its gold badge caught the afternoon sunlight. He looked directly at Brian. You'll have your answer. But first, He turned toward one of his investigators. "Read the preliminary authorization." The investigator removed a folded document stamped with the seal of a federal court. He unfolded it carefully. Every television camera zoomed closer. Every phone pointed toward him. The investigator drew a slow breath, then began reading the first line aloud. "By authority granted under sealed federal judicial order." Jason's confident expression disappeared. For the first time that day, real fear appeared in his eyes. The federal investigator unfolded the document until every page lay perfectly flat. His voice was steady enough to silence the helicopters circling overhead. "By authority granted under sealed federal judicial order, this task force has supervised an ongoing public corruption investigation involving evidence tampering, false arrests, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy under federal jurisdiction." A murmur swept through the crowd. Jason Miller forced an uneasy laugh. "This has nothing to do with me." The investigator continued reading. "The investigation has remained under seal for 26 months. Brian Collins looked toward the senior agent. "What investigation?" The senior agent answered calmly. "The one you've been helping us complete." Jason's face hardened. "You've got the wrong officers." The senior agent slowly turned toward Alicia. "For 26 months. She made sure we didn't." The parking lot fell completely silent. Every camera pivoted toward the handcuffed woman. Jason shook his head. "No." The senior agent stepped toward Alicia and stopped directly in front of her. He raised the leather credential wallet so every news camera could see the gold badge inside. Then, in a clear voice that echoed across the parking lot, he announced, "Special Operations Coordinator Alicia Brooks." The words hit Jason like a physical blow. "No," the senior agent continued. "Federal Public Integrity Task Force." Several reporters gasped. The television anchor instinctively repeated the words into her microphone. Did he just say, "Special Operations Coordinator"? The senior agent nodded once. "Yes." Jason stared at Alicia as though seeing her for the first time. "No." He looked at Brian. "She's lying." Without a word, the senior agent handed the credential wallet to the nearest television camera. The cameraman zoomed in. The federal seal, the identification photograph, the security hologram, the signature. Everything was unmistakably authentic. The reporter's voice trembled. "The credential appears genuine." Brian took one slow step backward. "This isn't possible." Alicia finally spoke. "It became possible the day innocent people started disappearing into prison because of manufactured evidence." Jason immediately pointed toward the drugs. "It doesn't matter who you are. The cocaine was still in your vehicle." The senior agent looked toward another investigator. "Play Exhibit 21. The investigator connected the encrypted drive to a portable monitor mounted inside the forensic cart. Within seconds, high-definition surveillance footage filled the screen. It wasn't from Jason's body camera. It wasn't from the reporter. It wasn't from a cell phone. The camera angle came from high above the parking lot. Jason frowned. "What is that?" The investigator answered. "Independent aerial surveillance." The footage showed Alicia parking her SUV, then Jason approaching. Then, the image zoomed closer. Every movement became unmistakably clear. Jason walked behind the SUV. His right hand disappeared inside his jacket. A vacuum-sealed package appeared. He looked over both shoulders, then quietly placed the package inside the rear compartment before calling everyone over. A collective gasp erupted across the parking lot. "No way. Oh my God. He planted it." The elderly veteran slowly removed his cap. "I knew what I saw." The little girl looked toward Alicia with tears in her eyes. "I told you she wasn't bad." Jason's face turned pale. "That video is fake." Another investigator stepped forward. Exhibit 22. The monitor changed. This time it displayed synchronized footage from 3 different civilian security cameras surrounding the supermarket. 3 angles, 3 timestamps, 3 identical sequences. Each one captured Jason disappearing behind the SUV before discovering the drugs. The television reporter covered her mouth. "There are 3 different recordings." The investigator nodded. "And all 3 were collected before today's operation." Jason desperately pointed toward the screen. "They've been edited." The senior agent calmly looked toward the forensic specialist. "Verification?" The specialist answered immediately. "No evidence of alteration." "Metadata? Authenticated." "Time synchronization? Verified." Jason looked around desperately. "Brian." Brian opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The senior agent wasn't finished. Exhibit 23. The portable monitor switched again. This time, Jason's own body camera footage appeared, but not the version stored inside his department's server. The original recording. Everyone watched as the body camera briefly captured Jason lowering his arm behind the SUV. The image suddenly skipped forward. The investigator paused the video. The departmental copy begins here. He tapped another key. The original federal backup begins here. A split screen appeared. On the left, the department's edited recording. On the right, the uninterrupted original. Exactly 11 seconds had been removed. 11 seconds, just enough time to hide Jason planting the drugs. The crowd erupted. He edited it. They erased part of the recording. That's why she kept saying it wasn't hers. Brian stumbled backward. No, Jason pointed wildly toward the monitor. I didn't edit anything. The senior agent calmly replied, No, you didn't. He turned toward Brian. But someone with administrative access did. Every eye shifted to the sergeant. Brian's breathing became uneven. He couldn't finish. Another federal investigator stepped forward carrying a thick evidence binder. We also recovered maintenance logs showing unauthorized access to department evidence servers less than 40 minutes after the arrest. Brian's face lost all color. The television reporter looked directly into the live camera. Millions of viewers are witnessing what appears to be one of the most significant public corruption cases our city has ever seen. Alicia slowly turned toward Jason. Her voice remained calm. I told you, you arrested the wrong woman. Jason lowered his eyes for the first time, but the senior agent had one final surprise. He looked toward two federal investigators standing behind the crowd. Bring in Observer 3. The older man with the battered shopping cart quietly stepped forward. He removed his worn jacket, then his faded cap. Beneath the disguise was a neatly pressed federal tactical shirt. He reached into his pocket and displayed his own federal credentials. Jason's eyes widened. You! The older man nodded. I've been watching you for 8 months. The entire parking lot stood frozen in stunned silence. The parking lot remained frozen. No one spoke. No one even lowered their phones. The man everyone believed was a homeless scavenger calmly displayed his federal credentials before slipping them back inside his jacket. My name is Daniel Hayes, he said. Senior Field Observer, Federal Public Integrity Task Force. He looked directly at Jason Miller. For the last 8 months, I've watched nearly every traffic stop you've made. Jason's lips parted. You? Followed me? Daniel answered without emotion. No, I documented you. He reached into the battered shopping cart that had fooled everyone for months and removed a weatherproof evidence case. The cart had never been filled with trash. Inside were neatly labeled hard drives, memory cards, sealed evidence bags, and dozens of handwritten observation logs. Daniel placed the case on the hood of a federal SUV. Everything recovered under continuous chain of custody. Another investigator immediately verified the tamper evidence seals. Confirmed. The senior federal agent nodded. Add it to the record. Jason looked around desperately. This proves nothing. Daniel calmly opened one evidence binder. It proves enough. He removed a photograph, then another, then another. Each image showed Jason standing behind different vehicles during unrelated traffic stops. Each photograph was stamped with a different date, a different location, a different victim. The television reporter stared at the growing stack. How many cases are there? Daniel answered quietly. 43. A wave of disbelief swept through the crowd. 43? The elderly veteran slowly shook his head. How many innocent people? He couldn't finish the sentence. Daniel continued. 43 documented incidents. We believe there are more. The senior federal agent looked toward another investigator. Status on the search teams? The investigator touched his earpiece. Team Bravo has secured the police evidence room. Team Charlie has entered internal records. Team Delta is executing the warrant on Sergeant Collins' office. Brian's face instantly drained of color. You searched my office? The agent didn't answer. Instead, another radio transmission crackled across the channel. Command, this is Team Bravo. Go ahead. We've located multiple evidence lockers with broken seal histories. A second voice interrupted. Team Charlie. Recovered deleted body camera archives. Another transmission followed immediately. Team Delta. We found cash, unlogged narcotics, and sealed evidence envelopes hidden behind a false storage wall. The crowd erupted. Oh my God. It wasn't just one arrest. Jason looked toward Brian. Brian refused to meet his eyes. For the first time since becoming partners, neither man knew what to say. The television reporter turned toward her camera. Federal search teams are now reporting discoveries inside the police department itself. This investigation appears far larger than anyone imagined. Meanwhile, another federal SUV arrived carrying several cardboard archive boxes. Each box bore a victim's name. The senior federal agent placed the first box on a folding table. Case 12. He opened it. Inside rested photographs, arrest reports, and lab documents. This defendant accepted a plea agreement after cocaine was allegedly found inside her vehicle. He placed another file beside it. Case 19. A father of two spent 3 years in prison. Another. Case 27. A military veteran lost his pension after evidence later determined to be unreliable. Another. Case 34. A nursing student lost her scholarship before charges were quietly dismissed. The files continued covering the table until dozens of lives lay exposed in paper form. Silence settled over the parking lot once more. Alicia slowly walked toward the table after a federal investigator carefully unlocked her handcuffs. The metallic click echoed louder than the cuffs ever had when they were closed. She gently rubbed her wrists before looking at the rows of case files. They all deserved better. The senior federal agent nodded. And because you refused to quit, they finally have a chance. Jason watched as the same crowd that had believed him only minutes earlier now stared at him with disgust. The whispers changed. He's the criminal. He framed people. How many families did he destroy? The little girl who had saved Alicia's photograph quietly walked over and handed it back. I knew you'd need this. Alicia smiled warmly. Thank you. You protected something important. The child looked at Jason. Why would a police officer lie? Alicia knelt to her eye level. Most officers don't. She looked toward the federal agent standing nearby. And that's exactly why the good ones worked so hard to stop the bad ones. Several local police officers who had arrived as backup lowered their heads in silence. One of them slowly removed his own badge, looked at Jason, and said, You made every honest officer here look smaller. Jason finally exploded. You think I'm the only one? The parking lot fell silent again. He pointed toward Brian. He signed the reports. He approved the evidence. He knew everything. Brian snapped back. You planted the drugs. You told me nobody would ever question us. Jason stepped toward him. You edited the recordings. You erased the footage. 2 federal agents immediately separated them before the confrontation became physical. The senior federal agent calmly looked at both men. You've spent years blaming innocent people. Today, you can explain yourselves to each other. He turned toward the investigators. Execute the arrest warrants. Without hesitation, 4 federal agents approached. One stood before Jason, another before Brian. The lead investigator spoke clearly enough for every microphone to capture. Officer Jason Miller, Sergeant Brian Collins, you are under arrest on federal charges including conspiracy, evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, deprivation of civil rights under color of law, and related offenses. This time, the handcuffs closed around different wrists. Jason looked down in disbelief as steel locked around his hand. Only hours earlier, he had tightened those same cuffs around Alicia. Now they belonged to him. As agents escorted the 2 disgraced officers towards separate federal vehicles, the crowd did not cheer. Instead, they stood quietly, watching justice replace fear. But the investigation was not over. The senior federal agent looked toward Alicia. We've identified 43 victims. He paused. I have a feeling we're about to find many more. Jason Miller stood motionless as the federal agents guided him toward a waiting SUV. For the first time in years, he wasn't giving orders. He wasn't threatening anyone. He wasn't wearing the confident smile that had frightened countless innocent people. He was simply another defendant in handcuffs. The parking lot remained silent. No applause. No celebration. Only the quiet realization that justice had finally caught up with 2 men who had spent years believing they were untouchable. Sergeant Brian Collins lowered his head as another federal agent read him his rights. Neither man argued anymore. The evidence had become impossible to deny. The senior federal agent watched both suspects disappear inside separate vehicles before turning back toward Alicia Brooks. He smiled for the first time all afternoon. Operation Clean Shield is officially complete. Several federal agents exchanged relieved glances. Some had spent more than 2 years working toward this moment. Others had sacrificed promotions, transferred cities, or lived under assumed identities to protect the investigation. Daniel Hayes, the man who had spent 8 months disguised as a homeless shopper, removed the fake beard that had hidden his appearance. He laughed softly. I don't think I'll miss pushing that shopping cart. Several agents chuckled. Alicia smiled. You pushed it well. Daniel shrugged. I had excellent motivation. He looked toward the long rows of evidence boxes. Every family in those files. Alicia followed his gaze. They're why we stayed. The senior federal agent nodded. And because we stayed, they'll finally be heard. Nearby, the television reporter slowly approached Alicia. Her camera operator remained several steps behind, respecting the moment. I'm sorry, the reporter said quietly. When this started, I believed the arrest. Alicia smiled gently. So did almost everyone else. The reporter lowered her microphone. How did you stay so calm? Alicia looked around the parking lot. At the frightened witnesses. At the federal, investigators carefully collecting evidence. At the elderly veteran standing proudly with his granddaughter. Then she answered, because panic helps people who already have power. But patience gives the truth time to arrive. The reporter nodded silently. I'll remember that. Not far away, several local police officers remained standing together. None of them spoke. One officer finally stepped forward. He removed his patrol cap before facing Alicia. I'm Officer Michael Torres. I've worn this badge for 14 years. His voice cracked slightly. I'm sorry. I should have asked more questions. Alicia shook his hand. The fact that you're asking them now means your badge still has value. Several officers standing behind Michael quietly straightened their shoulders. For the first time that afternoon, they felt hope instead of shame. Hours later, the federal operation expanded across the city. Search warrants were executed at multiple locations. Evidence lockers were reopened. Old convictions were reviewed. Independent prosecutors established a special review panel for every case connected to Jason Miller and Brian Collins. Within days, the number of suspected wrongful arrests climbed from 43 to 58, then 64, then 71. Every new file represented another life waiting for answers. 3 weeks later, the courthouse steps overflowed with reporters. Families who had once believed no one would ever listen now stood together holding photographs of loved ones. Some had lost years. Others had lost careers. Many had lost faith. Alicia stood quietly beside the federal task force as the United States Attorney addressed the nation. Our justice system is only worthy of public trust when it is willing to correct its own failures. No badge places anyone above the law. No title excuses corruption. And no innocent citizen should ever fear the people sworn to protect them. The statement was carried live across the country. One after another, wrongful convictions connected to the corruption ring were reopened. Several defendants were immediately released. Others received new hearings. Families embraced outside courtrooms that had once separated them. Months later, the abandoned community center where Alicia had first been introduced to the story looked very different. Fresh paint covered the old walls. Children played basketball outside. Parents gathered for legal education workshops offered by volunteer attorneys and retired investigators. A new sign hung above the entrance. Brooks Community Justice Center. Daniel Hayes smiled as he looked at the building. Never thought they'd name it after you. Alicia laughed. I argued against it. I know. You lost. Both smiled. Inside the center, framed photographs lined one wall. Not of federal agents. Not of politicians, but of ordinary people whose courage had changed everything. The elderly veteran stood proudly in one photograph beside his granddaughter. The little girl who had returned Alicia's family picture smiled brightly. The television reporter appeared in another photograph after receiving a National Journalism Award for refusing to stop asking questions. Officer Michael Torres and dozens of honest officers volunteered their time, teaching young recruits that integrity mattered more than authority. One wall carried a single sentence engraved in brushed steel. The truth does not become weaker because someone tries to hide it. Visitors often stop there before leaving. Many quietly touched the words. One autumn afternoon, Alicia found the little girl sitting on a bench outside the center. She was older now, still carrying the same kindness in her eyes. I still have something, the girl said. She reached into her backpack and carefully removed a plastic sleeve. Inside rested the family photograph Alicia had dropped in the supermarket parking lot. I kept it safe. Alicia smiled warmly. You kept your promise. The girl looked up. Did everything work out? Alicia thought about the question. She remembered frightened families, courtrooms, evidence boxes, years stolen from innocent people. Then she remembered the people who refused to stay silent. It didn't all work out. She paused, but it finally started. The girl nodded thoughtfully. I want to help people someday. Alicia placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You already did. As the afternoon sun settled across the community center, families continued arriving. Children laughed. Neighbors talked. Volunteers welcomed strangers like old friends. Life moved forward, not because injustice had never existed, but because ordinary people had found the courage to confront it together. Sometimes justice arrives with sirens. Sometimes it arrives with a courtroom. And sometimes it begins with one person refusing to surrender the truth, even while standing in handcuffs. If this story reminded you that integrity is strongest when no one is watching, share it with someone who still believes honesty matters. And if you've ever seen an ordinary act of courage change someone's life, Tell us about it in the comments. Because every story of truth encourages another person to stand up when the next moment of injustice arrives.